As we quickly approach the end of the book of Jeremiah, we get to something that I think is interesting. You know, every now and then you reach these little points in the Bible that, to me, at least answer questions that maybe you didn't even realize you had, but when someone asks it, you go, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. One of those questions for me is, whatever happened to all of these ites people? And what I mean by that is, you think about this, you have in the Old Testament all these, Hittites and Ammonites and Edomites and Perizzites and, all these different types of ites people that we just don't see. I mean, for that matter, think about in the Old Testament how much we talk about the Philistines when it comes to David and, even some of the events that happened before and after. You have these people that pop up over and over again, but yet somehow we get to the point where you are just before the coming of Christ or even into the New Testament and you don't hear about these individuals anymore. So what happened to them? Well, you end up seeing that here in these final several chapters in the book of Jeremiah. What you end up seeing is God doing, you could think of it tying up loose ends. He's explaining what happens to all these different individual nations. Now, what he is communicating is that these different individual nations at various points in time played a role in standing up against God's chosen people. In a sense, they were trying to stand in the way of what God had willed. And so you see God prophesying, through the prophet of Jeremiah, that these individuals are going to end up going away, that they're going to end up being destroyed or conquered or scattered to the winds themselves. Now, there's two different things taking place. There's something that's literally happening to the individuals who are reading the prophecies of Jeremiah, and then there is a broader theological theme here. The thing specifically for Jeremiah is it is being communicated that God remains faithful to his people. That God, even though he is permitting this discipline to occur to his people, where they're going to come in and they're going to get conquered by the Babylonians and they're going to be taken away from Jerusalem, even though these terrible things are occurring, God is still there. God still loves his people and God still favors his people. He's disciplining them in the same way that a parent disciplines a child. You don't hate your child just because you discipline them, but you are permitting them to go through something that is unpleasant. So, historically, this becomes a very important message to send because of what people thought in this day and age. You see, the thinking was that you and your town would have had your town's God, and then those towns would have had their town gods. And if your town was ever able to conquer this other town, that meant your God was more powerful. So you see, there was actually a very relevant cultural lesson that was being given to God's chosen people. Even though I am permitting you to be conquered, do not be fooled into thinking this cultural thing that somehow I am not in control, because I am still in complete control. Even though you are going through a challenge, even though you're going through a valley in life, I am still there and I still reign sovereign. And that's actually where we get into the theological message. The thing that's there for all of us, even us who don't live in this culture that the Judeans found themselves in, we can take the exact same lesson away. That even though we may go through different trials in our own life, God still remains sovereign. That becomes crucially important since our world provides us so many ways out of our trouble, both physical, financial, psychological, spiritual, whatever it may be. The world will sit here and say, you have all these support systems, you have all these resources, and you know what? If you use some of those things, fine, but understand that those things are just temporary earthly band-aids. What truly brings us peace and comfort in our difficult times is going to be relying on the sovereign, on the Most High, relying on our God who does not change. Because even though things of this world may try to stand against us and other things of this world may try to say, I have the answer, only one thing has dominion over all creation, and that is the Lord our God. Now, as God is tying up all these loose ends through the prophet Jeremiah, notably there is one group of people that is missing from this conversation, and those are the Babylonians. Now, on the surface of it, that kind of makes sense, right? Because the Babylonians, in a sense, are actually still victorious. These are individuals that God isn't done using. Even though these are individuals who are pagan individuals, God is still using them, but He's using them as a tool. And at the end of the day, is that all you really want to be? Is all you want to be just a tool, or do you want to be a part of the family? Do you want to be an heir of this promise of glory that God has made? Well, Babylon is not done being a tool used by God. So even though they do not stand for God, even though they are not being obedient to God's covenant or anything like that, they're still being used. And so they may find themselves in a moment of victory for now, but again, God is going to reinforce that same theme, that He is in control. And so as a part of that, He is going to communicate through Jeremiah that even though these Babylonians may look like they are winning now, here's the destruction I have for them. It's interesting because there is a song by the band POD, if I can show my age for a second, that is called Babylon the Murderer. And when you go through and you listen to this song, it just has so many lyrics that talk about just like utter and total destruction of these individuals that, are living for their own idols and whatnot. And it's a song that really conveys the power of God's dominion. And that is exactly what you see in these last few chapters before you get to the very end of the book, where through Jeremiah, it is being communicated that Babylon will indeed fall. And it stands to reason that we look at this and we are kind of confronted with this idea that no matter how big an institution may appear to us today, all institutions can in fact fall. We so often want to found our own sense of comfort and security and satisfaction, maybe even our identity, on the institutions of this world. And when we do that, sometimes we start fooling ourselves into thinking that some of those things can't fail. The phrase pops up over and over again, that something is too big to fail. Rest assured, much bigger cultures, companies, churches, what have you, than anything we're a part of today, over the course of human history, have stood up, and also they themselves thought that they were too big to fail, and yet they did. Because the reality is that when institutions of men pop up, and we start assuming that those things are more powerful than God, it's just a matter of time before God reinforces to those individuals and to everyone else around them that I am going to demonstrate to you that I am the sovereign and that I reign supreme. It is both easy and natural to start wondering and asking questions when our life gets difficult. It's easy to start saying, where is God in this? How is God trying to communicate to me? I mean, look, I see people around me who appear like they're living for all manner of different corrupt things or things of this world, and they seem to be getting ahead in life. Maybe if I do that, maybe if I abandon things of God and instead prioritize these worldly things, maybe I too can have that same sense of success or that same, feeling of contentment that they have. Maybe I can enjoy all the same things that they are enjoying. And what's missed in that conversation is what sometimes we forget when we suffer from this recency bias, that we're looking at what people may be experiencing right now, and maybe for a season they're enjoying victory, maybe for a season they're enjoying peace and contentment. But at the end of the day, all those things are fleeting. They're based on a very, very, very shaky foundation. I'm going to throw this out there, just to maybe encourage a sense of self-awareness amongst many of us, that we live in a very privileged society, and I don't mean that with any kind of political or cultural context or anything, but we do, in fact, quite literally live in a very privileged society. The idea of like cultural safety nets, things that the government does provide for us, things that even our cultures and communities feel obligated to do for one another, these are things that for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries, mankind did not have. And I think what that has done to our religious sense of mind is it's caused us to not really understand what it means to be truly helpless. I think it's so often why you find individuals that are forced into helpless situations, situations where maybe they're incarcerated, situations where maybe something is life and death, and all of a sudden they start seeing God. Well, it's because in our world, we have so many things around us that can trick us into thinking that, you're going to be okay. It's all going to be perfectly fine. But here's the harsh reality of this world. Sometimes it's not going to be fine. Sometimes it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. Sometimes Superman's not going to swoop in and save the day. And when that happens, what are you going to do? If you've tricked yourself into thinking that God is good, but God's goodness is dependent on all this little goodness and security and peace that you have around you all day long, then when life finally confronts you, your faith is going to be shaken. And that's why it's so important for us to not place our faith in these little mental, physical, or spiritual towers of Babel that sometimes we'll create of our own making. We have to pursue God. We have to be praying. We have to be getting into the Word. We have to be pursuing a deeper relationship with God, because it is God and God alone, not the things that we heap on top of God or not the things that we try to add to God, but it's going to be God alone that is going to carry us through when we have nothing left to lean on. That's our lesson that we have for today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. And until we can meet again, God bless.